Welcome to Wearables Weekly, episode number 39. We've got a lot in this show today. We've got a lot to cover. We had a lot that happened in the past week and a half. Also, we've got two amazing guests, Alan Firstenberg and Jason Salas. Alan's from New York. He is a New York-based consultant, developer, and author, and was the first Google developer expert for Glass. He also holds GDE credentials for Google+. Jason is coming to us from Guam. He's a developer, broadcaster, author, and filmmaker who enjoys perpetual summer on the island of Guam. And his friends describe him as a sportscaster, author, and 80s music fan. So, hey, guys.
Hey there. Good to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I guess I'll just kick off the show and saying, Keith and Libby and Cecilia have been dear, dear friends of mine. Libby in particular, because we have a ongoing rivalry on Fitbit on who can make
you're gonna bring that up now.
Yeah, who can get the most step counts, and at least for this week, I am like blowing Libby away. So I'm gonna go ahead and brag about that because normally she blows me out of the water, but I'm doing okay this week.
Oh, just wait. The next time I've got you under my thumb, I will shame you publicly.
There will be screen caps aplenty, I'm sure.
There will be.
Well, both of you guys will be running circles around me, except that I found the incognito mode in Fitbit, which is to not let it sync for a little while, and you kind of fall off the list.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and jump into what happened in this past week and a half. So we had Maker Faire last weekend. Maker Faire, for those of you who aren't too familiar with it, it's essentially a fair for geeks who like to make stuff and geeks who like to create, from just crafty projects to robotics to all sorts of fun stuff, 3D printing. So the Society of Glass Enthusiasts, we had a meetup at the Maker Faire, and there really is so much stuff. There's so much stuff out there.
Yeah, for anybody that's not familiar with Make Magazine or the Maker movement in general, it's like we said, a bunch of geeks that have like awesome projects from like 3D printed stuff to Raspberry Pis. They had like drone battles and like a whole wing of robotics and light up stuff. So it was very cool. And they had a couple of familiar faces, like you might recognize Adam Savage from Mythbusters. He was there talking about some of his projects and all sorts of stuff. But this is a huge event in the Bay Area. This is like the biggest Maker Faire that they have in the country, so it's an awesome event to turn out for.
And I think in a couple of weeks they're going over to your area, Alan. I know there's a Maker Faire New York coming up.
There is a Maker Faire New York that's usually held midsummer. I don't remember the exact dates, but I guess I could look it up while we're continuing to talk. And there are tons of mini Maker Fairs around the country throughout the year. So
yeah.
If you're interested in this sort of thing, definitely find out where the local one is and stop by, because people are doing awesome stuff. I know I was fortunate enough to be out in San Francisco last year for last year's Maker Faire, and just walking around it, it's unbelievable what people are doing, and it's stuff ranging from design your own robotics to what can you do with 500,000 Lego bricks.
Oh yes, there was a big Lego pit out there this year, and
yeah, it was essentially like a ball pit for kids, but full of Legos instead of full of plastic.
And there was also
I gotta say, when I was there last year, though, it was me and one other person that I ran into wearing glass, and it sounds like this year there's a lot more people that were wandering around with glass on.
Yeah, even outside of our group, that we saw at least a dozen more people, and there was about a dozen of us. So
that sounds like every show from last year to this year is going to pretty much be that way. CES was even starting the year was like that.
Yeah,
well,
that's
and you know what? Somewhat tangentially, there's a maker shop that is finally getting set up in my neck of the woods, in this part of the world in Guam. So some people got together, and they actually want to put together a 24/7 center where people can go and exchange ideas and buy materials and source just like raw supplies and everything, and just go there and just for the love of creating and out of the spirit of innovation. So it's we're a couple steps behind, but we're catching up.
Having that community is really key for this sort of stuff, because there's so many tools and projects and ideas you can get from just working with other people, and there's equipment that maybe one person wouldn't be able to have, but a community can get together and sort of share one. So that's awesome. You guys are getting one now.
Yeah, those places, the maker spaces are a lot of fun. You get to play with some tools that you definitely would never be able to have in your own garage. I remember going into one maker space and they had a like a make your own canoe setup thing where they would steam the wood, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I believe the mascot for this year's Maker Faire was the fire-breathing octopus.
Yeah, that
That
was
was pretty
fun.
cool.
You know, just based on what I'm seeing, like with everybody posting on Google Plus these days, I think the octopus is probably going to replace the cat. I'm giving it maybe 4 more months as the preferred member of the animal kingdom that we all celebrate. But it really seems the octopus is getting a lot of love these days.
So Catterday is no longer going to be for cats. It's going to be octopus. I don't know how to integrate
And I
octopus with
realize
Saturday,
that
but
I realize that talking bad about any sort of like feline animal is sacrilegious on Google Plus. But octopi are gaining in popularity.
It already happened with llamas and goats. So already llamas not so cool, goats cooler. So it can happen, yeah.
so other things that happened in the glass world. Let's see. Glass heads to Hershey, Pennsylvania. There was a meetup. I believe it was put together by Katarina in for a trip to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and there were several pictures posted. It looks like they had a good time. Unfortunately, I don't think any of us were able to make it out there, so we can't really talk about it too much. But
No, we can just be jealous from afar. They had, I mean, Hershey's is obviously named after their location, so.
yes, I think I had a celebratory chocolate that day.
Nice.
Also in DC, Google Glass office hours and design sprint. Jenny Murphy was over there. I believe Timothy Jordan was there as well. And
Nope, it was
Alan, were you there?
It was just Jenny Murphy and myself. I took the trip down to DC for this event.
oh, cool. How'd it go?
It went really well. I mean, it's they had some beautiful space that they were in. 1776 is a great hacker-like space, and we were able to clear out a fairly big corner. I think the final count was somewhere between 50 and 70 people that were there.
Oh, wow.
A great turnout. Jenny led us all through a design sprint, and for those of you who haven't been through one of Jenny or Timothy's design sprints, you really should find a time to do so. They've been pushing the design concepts a lot more, and you're going to see a lot more of that kind of push over the next few months. Great working with the DC team. It's always fun meeting up with those guys. So this is my first opportunity to meet some of them and work with them. So that was great. And it's always great touching base with the developer community to find out what are your questions, what are the problems that you're running into, and how can I, as a GDE and a developer advocate, help you, and what can we do together as a developer community? And we're doing some awesome stuff, and that's always great to see.
Very cool. Yeah, we'll have to get a list of when Jenny does her design sprints posted. I think there's actually one coming up this Wednesday.
Oh, really? Where?
I believe there's one at the Hacker Dojo up here that's coming up.
Gotcha.
But Keith, I think I might need you to verify that.
I know Jenny frequently does Hacker Dojo office hours, so she'll go
Yes.
down and help out there. She doesn't always do the design sprint stuff. The next design sprint that I'm aware of will be at I/O itself.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that's run by Timothy Jordan. It'll be on day 2. So if you're going to I/O, check out Timothy Jordan's presentation on day 2. I believe it's 9 to 11. That's
Very
off
cool.
the top of my head.
Well, for those not educated in exactly what a design sprint is, like what do you do in terms of the discussions being had, or like is it really hands-on things like a hackathon would be, or is it just like a series of exercises that you go through in assembling the flow of a glassware application?
It's even a step back from that. It kind of the way most of the design sprints have been done is they review the general design principles, which you and I are very familiar with, Jason, and help make sure people understand the things, what is glass good at, what is it good for, make sure everyone's got a firm foundation and that sort of thing, and then go through a process that Google has found useful in identifying needs for an application and bringing that to some level where you can then start to say, okay, how do we code this? So it's very similar to brainstorming, or for those of you that have gone through some of Google's broader exercises in game storming, it's very similar to some of that. But again, it kind of takes a look at, okay, how do we make sure we understand the problem? How do we narrow it down? How do we work together to identify the best possible solutions? And from that, where do we go from there? What does the glassware going to look like in its broad screen-based session? So it goes from very broad concept to wireframing and diagramming.
Because a lot of people, even experienced developers, like in talking to people about this, they think it's like, okay, well, you can read the documentation on on Google's site, on the Google developers pages, and then you can talk to a few people. But then when you actually sit down and try and like chart out exactly how you get from screen to screen to screen, or bring up the menus and everything, and try and actually simplify it where you're in line with their with the micro interaction model that they really push, it's a lot more challenging than you might think.
It is, and this is a case where one of the things the design sprint helps you with is understand how do you work with other people to actually do that narrowing. How do you work with other people to hone your ideas? And the design sprint gives you some tools that you have to really do that.
So it sounds like it's good practice for anybody who's interested in developing for Glass. At least it'll get their feet wet for a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that Jason and I you'll hear us talk about a lot is the writing code. That's the easy part.
Mm-hmm.
Designing, that's hard. And this gives you a lot of tools that developers don't traditionally have or think about to kind of get started in that design process.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to pick your brain a little bit more later on in the show when we talk about what you guys have been doing this past year. So that'll definitely be fun to discuss in more detail. Going back to what else has been going on in the Glass world. Last weekend there was also a Bike Across San Francisco event. Bike across the Golden Gate Bridge, I should say. Bike across the Golden Gate Bridge with our Glass community.
Yeah, this is a lot of fun, and biking is one of those activities that really utilizes one of the features of Glass, which is being able to capture moments while you're on the bike, while you're riding. You can take pictures or record videos, and obviously you're not going to be hands-free that whole time. So these are just some pictures that people uploaded from the event, throughout the day. Let's see if I can get some on the bikes. Like up here, you can see some people like doing video recording while they were still safely riding their bikes. But it was a perfect day. We met a lot of people and shared a lot of good stories, so it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was
like fun.
Yeah, the weather was perfect that day. Although we all walked away with sunburns.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
It's better than fog, I guess. So.
Yeah, it's better than freezing. That's for sure.
I'm just curious, as the resident island boy here in this panel and everything, exactly how do you guys sunburn when it's, what are you talking, like 80, 83 degrees?
Actually, it's tricky because you can sunburn in like very cool temperatures. It's just, especially when it's just lightly overcast, because you think, oh, it's overcast. I don't need to wear sunscreen.
Those are the worst.
Yeah.
In my case, I actually put on enough sunscreen. It was okay on my face and normal areas, but the back of my calves, I didn't put any sunscreen on there. And since we were biking north across the bridge, I guess I got a lot of exposure on my calves.
Yeah, I got a really strange sunburn. So I was living in Florida, to cover up when you're in the sun, because whatever's not covered is going to get burned. So I did not put sunblock on my hands. I don't know if you can see it. So I have like this really funky tan line right here.
Wow.
And everything else is not tanned. So it's always the places that you don't really think about, but that's of course not really related to anything wearables. Well, maybe it is. Wear sunscreen. It's important.
Maybe there might be a wearable device with a sensor somewhere in the future that'll actually tell you when you're about to sunburn.
Oh, that'd be nice.
Actually, yeah, or there could be a glassware app that'll just tell you, hey, by the way, your sun exposure today is like 95% or something.
Yeah, measure like the UV light or something.
Well, just if you've got the local weather report, they've got a UV estimate. So based on that estimate and based on how much time you're outside, a rough estimate could tell you when you've hit some level of exposure. But a UV sensor would be very cool.
Yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. So other events that have happened, the Augmented World Expo was earlier this week. I think it was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Cecilia spoke at it, and Keith's got some pictures up.
So I'll just share a little bit right here. This is so the Augmented World Expo, as its name suggests, is all about devices and services that help you augment your world, either for fun or for work or whatnot. So this is actually Libby trying on the Epson, what's it called?
Moveo.
Which Cecilia can fill us in a little bit more on later. So this is one of the more practical augmented devices, although it's still kind of bulky compared to glass. This one's on the less practical side. This was actually a sort of a game, but it utilized an actual cell phone. You'd slide in there, and it would reflect the screen and reflect the camera and sort of let you have some simulated augmented reality.
Which one was that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name.
It's not on the market right now.
Or something.
Yeah, it's actually not on the market right now. So it's similar to, I shouldn't say Oculus Rift because it's not completely immersive, but it is really the only device that we saw that does do both virtual reality and augmented reality in the same device. I will say this, it's not very successful at either of it, and it's very heavy.
Is that the Cast AR?
No. Actually, strangely enough, they didn't seem to be at the AWE. They were at Maker Faire, and I've seen their device before, which is very impressive, but I didn't see them at AWE.
I really like the Cast AR device. That is one of my favorites in that field.
And this is one of our fellow bike riders, Shannon Fume, showing off one of the apps from Ina. Was it Ina?
Yosen.
Which was to augment your arm with a little overlay of a cyborg arm implant. Maybe you saw like the Nod. It was a little ring gesture control device with buttons and sensors, so you can control devices from a distance. Brick Simple was there, and as well as the Augie award-winning team of David Lee and Liza Gear, who did like a very interesting tutorial app. So. Using the Epson device, you could walk through like a series of steps for, I think their example was IKEA furniture or something like that. Intel had a pretty big presence there, but mostly carried over from their perceptual computing devices.
Coming back to the visor that you were showing, that you slide, I think it's called Seabright is the company.
That's right, Seabright. Yes.
Now I have a question, everybody, specifically for Cecilia. Seeing as how you spoke, and I'm guessing that you got like a really good pulse of the community there. What was the overriding theme in terms of like industries that would be affected? Because like AR has always been something that everybody in the development community has been very interested in, but the libraries have traditionally been very, very complex. They've been multi-layered. They've been based on C++, which not everybody gets into, and they've been somewhat difficult to use. Like, what disciplines were represented there? Like, maybe was it medical, was it educational, or like extreme sports, or what did you kind of see?
They have all of that. I actually was part of a panel on sports and health, for instance. I couldn't be in the whole event, but what I can tell you is this is the fifth time they do this event, and I was there last year. And the big difference I saw from last year to this year is that last year we were showing glass for the first time there. So like I had a session there showing glass, and nobody ever saw glass before. It was a huge success, obviously. The difference is this year there was obviously a lot of people using it, wearing glass. There were many sessions. Det Ansin actually was presenting, one of our community fellows, and there was a lot of more acceptance. Like this is a hardcore AR community, but I think they're seeing the value on doing something that is more contextual augmentation, or whatever you want to call what glass does. So
Very cool.
yeah, I see a big change there. There's still a big part of that community is hardcore augmented reality, but I think they're pretty pervasive as far as I think because they cannot pull it really for real applications yet. The augmented reality, there's a lot of gimmicks.
So
There's
I
a
will I will say this. I did see a lot of people in the construction industry that were extremely interested in augmented reality, mainly for directional usage on certain things or being able to pull up drawings or, again, directions on how to use a machine or how to build something. And so they were very, very interested in the possibility of AR.
Yeah, as Libby said, like the industries across the board. I mean, like from construction, there were games, kids apps, there was
real
a little bit of
estate.
medical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, really every possible field seemed to be represented there. So it's becoming a big thing, and also as Cecilia alluded to, a lot of bigger companies are getting involved now. I'd say there's a lot of great ideas and a lot of good services that are just waiting for the right hardware to sort of allow this to break out.
Yes.
And it's
Now,
cool.
was the company Blipper represented there as well? Because I don't know if it.
Someone else asked me about them. I think they were there. I kind of missed them, but they were in the expo. Yes.
Because there's a video that's being circulated now in our community for glass enthusiasts. Is Blipper is actually they've always tried to do like, okay, well, you aim your viewfinder at a picture or a glyph and it triggers some action, like typically it plays back a video. Now they're actually getting into developing a specific gaming engine where you can do quasi-immersive games, and I think the demo they had was you played like a version of Asteroids.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, you focus on a picture and you start having these rocks coming at you, right? And I saw the video.
Now, I see just from searching when you mentioned it. One thing I've got to say that was kind of nice about this, and maybe it just represents that it's not quite fully mainstream yet, is a lot of the business ideas that I see from just reading stuff all seems to be focusing around ads. How can you like look at this product and get an ad, or look at this movie poster and get a trailer? It's all about advertising. But actually, at Augmented World Expo, I didn't see any of that. It was all like actually very useful products, things that I think average users would want to use.
It's funny you say that, Keith, because when I was at Augmented World Expo New York a couple of months back, again, the feeling I got was that a lot of people were thinking in terms of ad recognition and other glyph recognition, as Jason alluded to. And part of that is because that's been a core research area in AR for a number of years now. And they're finally at the point where they've got sets of libraries that do that for them, and they're all written in C++. And they've mated those to Unity, which is a game engine. So those are their core bread and butter toolkits at this point, that they're just doing, lots of different companies are doing lots of different things built on those platforms. And that was, I'd say, a good half of the work that I was seeing at their New York show a few months back. The other half was mostly focused on things that those of us in glass are very familiar with, and those are contextual computing and how do you gather the data so that you can present the right information at the right time. So
and there's also a really interesting library out there. I believe it's called, correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, but I think it's called Rubex. But it's obviously it's for the Ruby community. But what it does is it's kind of a one-stop shopping solution if you want to do things like AR, because it's got elements that you can build into games, or you can do things like image recognition or object detection or things like that.
I did see a lot of the services we're using, since you mentioned Unity there, Ellen, that there were a lot of companies using that, I think, to do their model building. So you could look at a book or a T-shirt or a QR code or something that and have a little object pop up, which I remember one company was using that as like a virtual pop-up book for kids. Other ones, I guess, could be used for advertising, although it wasn't directly marketed like that for this show.
And what's also interesting, since you brought it up, Keith, is the concept of wearable technology. Everybody thinks, well, okay, you have to have, maybe a supercomputer on your face, or like on your wrist, or like as an anklet or something like that. There's a local guy out here who started a company, and he's actually doing some AR work. But what he's doing is silk screening a series of shirts where the actual logo on the shirt is essentially the glyph that triggers some AR action. So he's got people literally walking around, and anybody just has to launch an app and just aim it at somebody's clothing.
It's funny that you say that.
I got one right here, actually.
Like that. Yeah, Intel. So the Intel giveaway shirt was something very close.
Like this?
There you go.
Nice.
I missed it. You guys didn't tell me.
So if you download an app and then you aim your cell phone at it, all of a sudden a dinosaur will kind of pop up on the shirt.
Oh, cool.
And
The dinosaur or lots of things. Yeah, it was pretty neat.
the only problem with it is it didn't work too well if you had it on you. It kind of had to be flat, otherwise the dinosaur was kind of looking funky.
Well, that was the one funny thing. Yeah, when they had all the shirts laying out on the table, they worked perfectly. But they're like, but you can't really have it vertical because there's nothing to stand on, I guess. But that's pretty much how a shirt's worn. So I don't know.
Cool. So let's get into news.
Since we were talking about glassware design a little bit, this is going to come back to the fact that as augmented reality begins to mature and become a more amenable venue to glassware applications, how are we going to use the fact that we're actually wearing a camera, which is essentially a short-range camera, and if you're going to aim this at a glyph, the glyph has pretty much got to be stationary and static, and you've got to be almost at point-blank range. So that's kind of a design challenge in and of itself.
Absolutely. What it kind of reminds me of, speaking of 80s references, do you remember at Back to the Future when he goes back and he's walking next to a movie theater and he sees that, I think it was a shark, was it? That comes at him?
It's coming back, yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes, it's the promo for, what was it, Jaws 13?
Oh, yeah.
So Jason, you mentioned that you have to have very powerful computers for this. Is that what I heard you say? For the image recognition?
Oh, just that's the assumption, and everybody thinks when you think wearable computing, okay, you've got to have like what would be considered these days like a very powerful computer. And to run AR applications, you've got to have it like at least a sophisticated device that can capture an image and manipulate it and probably have some sort of connectivity.
Well, what I'm wondering, and unfortunately I haven't tried this myself, but maybe one of you guys has, is that WordLens app. And I've used it on the phone and I've seen how it works, but does it run that smoothly on glass?
Yes and no. In some ways, it is disturbingly awesome at how well it works. Its biggest problem is that if you move the image slightly, it recomputes the entire image. So unless you keep your head really, really still, it's kind of jarring. And that's, broadly speaking, that's one of the problems that we see with a lot of glassware, and kind of why glass isn't always really meant to do those sorts of things. WordLens is a great demonstration app. I'm not sure it is the best example of how to handle some of these things sometimes, but and that's because that's how as humans we move our heads a lot. We're not chickens.
It still is pretty magical experience with WordLens in glass. It's like one of those things that, wow.
Well, let's talk about use cases since we're talking about WordLens. What have you guys actually used it for? Because everybody says, okay, well, you walk up to if you were in Germany and you walk up to a road sign and it says, Achtung, it's like, okay, well, that means, danger. And I think Timothy Jordan in his, now well-documented presentation says, okay, don't jump off this cliff. But I've actually tried to use WordLens and I've tried to stress test it. So I've tried to read Italian newspapers online. I've scanned, I went into my car and I flipped down the visor and I tried to read, and I've got a Toyota, so it's got, things in Japanese and German. I've tried to read the German translation of, what to do if you get a flat and everything like that. And so actually reading entire blocks of text in addition to individual words, it actually works pretty well. But it does heat up really, really hot, really fast.
Sure. I wonder if some of that's related to, I'm not sure what the size of the library they can download to glass is. Maybe it's more constrained than a phone they can regularly connect to the internet. I think the phone experience has been pretty positive for most people as far as languages. I know one of my coworkers said he doesn't get Russian very well. He speaks Russian and it's not translating very well. But I think between English and Spanish,
I think it's not a real. For me, I don't take it as a real application. I'll be completely honest. I think this is a glimpse into the future. It shows you what kind of world we can be living in a few years from now, and that is pretty amazing. But
and Alan and I actually. I'm sorry, Alan and I wrote about this in our book, and we said, okay, well, it takes something like WordLens or the Google Plus glassware. It actually does a fairly good job of translating alphabets that are based on Romance languages. So, German, Italian, stuff like that. But you take non-Western character sets like Japanese, Farsi, Cyrillics, since you brought up Russian and everything like that.
That's a whole new level of complexity.
Although now that they've been acquired by Google, I mean, the whole new world is opened as far as potential for putting resources behind this and fleshing out those languages.
Now more even you can see that we're going to have that in the future for like seamless translation of your world as you walk. But of course, the computing power is not there. I mean, the whole thing is not there, but it will happen.
Battery.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So let's move on to stories, because I do think we have the WordLens story later on the show as well. So the Moto 360, I'm sure you guys have all heard about that. Supposedly the price has been leaked at $250 a pop.
Yeah, it's true.
It's just a rumor. It's just a rumor.
I think it's a little more than a rumor, only because the documentation came from Motorola, and they've backed away from it and said, oh, it's really just for tax purposes and stuff. But regardless of the validity, if that's the price point, they've got a real winner on their hands, because I think most people were expecting $500, maybe $600 for the Moto X, just based on the finishing and like the general aesthetic. If they can get it down to $250, they're going to do very well, I think.
That makes it very, very attractive.
But it's not so clear that that's the price. I think the whole rumor and where it came from, it's all very kind of not something very trustable. And they denied, so really they reserved in a way the right to make it higher if they want to.
Right.
Well, from what I've read, I guess ARV was what something retail value, adjusted retail value, or something like that. And I've looked around at a couple contest forums just that I've seen in the last week, because the story broke about a week or two ago. And everything that I've seen pretty much lists the actual retail price. So.
But usually you're going to have contests for things that are out there, and they are not really out there. So who knows? Yeah, I mean, chances are it's a good possibility that it is $250.
Well, let's just so let's do a show of hands. If it is $250, who on this panel would buy one?
Oh, easy.
Yeah.
They're going to give us one in Google I/O.
A couple of Square fans over there.
Now I'm trying to think, because if the price is $250 for a device like that, which admittedly does maybe about half, if not more, of what glass can do, where does that position glass as far as what the glass price point would be?
Good question. Great question.
Well, they said somewhere that it would be more than 400. More than 400, less than
1,500.
So,
I'm still putting my hopes on 500.
And everybody and their dog is going to jump all over this, because they're going to say, okay, glass does A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The Android Wear devices only do A, B, C. Therefore, if it only does half as much, it should only cost half as much. And everybody is going to turn this
Oddly enough, Jason, everyone is actually going to spin that in the other direction. They're going to say
that's true.
that Wear does A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and Glass only does A, B, C. The popular perception is that Glass does less.
Yeah, because I think it's going to be harder to get for most people to get used to the form factor of glass than a watch, because I think most everybody is more used to wearing a watch and just having that on their wrist, as opposed to messing around with glass.
I had a conversation recently with the people that sell software to like the Uruguayan soccer selection. I know Jason is a soccer fan and sport fan, so I'll mention it for that reason. And they were thinking like a player in the field, that would be dangerous to have like a glass, but they could easily have like a watch that is covered by one of those things that they use on their wrists. So there's going to be many uses that are going to be so much more acceptable for a watch.
Right.
But as far as use cases, definitely glass is more capable. I mean, it's a standalone device. It doesn't need a phone except to get the internet connection, whereas from the design documents that they've released for Wear, it's pretty much just a notification bar for your phone, but on your wrist. You can do some minimal actions like you can on the notification bar of Android.
That's only the first version, Keith.
Right, but
Because they actually already said and announced that you're going to be able to do applications and put them in the OK Glass, do whatever. So that's going to exist.
Okay.
And Keith, remember, that's exactly what everybody said about Glass when it first came out. Oh,
Yes.
why would I want to get this? All it does is notifications.
Yeah.
We've been down this road before, and in fact, we're seeing the parallels between what we're seeing with Wear and what we're seeing with Glass is striking. I mean, I've seen the exact same reactions from some developers that I saw from developers a year ago with Glass. I mean, down to the comments.
So
and if I look at the design notes for Wear,
Yeah.
I see paragraphs that look like they were lifted right from Glass's design notes.
Right.
In fact,
It's like they were made by the same company or something.
Do anybody here think that at Google I/O they're going to announce a real SDK for Wear? Because that's what I'm praying that is going to happen.
I think so. I actually think so.
I don't think for I/O, because this will be like the
No.
first announcement. I mean, they're just going to, I mean, nobody has any proof yet of what it's going to be like. I think they'll start like they did with Glass. They'll release something like notifications, and later on come out with more fully.
To say a realistic what for Wear?
An SDK that is all comprehensive, that you can do your apps really.
Well, they've already announced the SDK. They've said that it's coming. I don't think we'll see the final version of it for I/O.
No.
I'm willing to bet, however, that we will see a sneak peek. Wait a minute, where have I heard this before?
That's all we need. That's all we want. Yes.
You know what I'm thinking too? I'm thinking on a personal level as a consumer, what I'm going to give as stocking stuffers this Christmas season
Yes.
isn't going to be technology at all. It's going to be power strips. I'm going to say, okay, for all my nieces and nephews here, I know you've got 900 different devices and you've got USB, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Pete. You've got USB chargers, up the wazoo and everything like that. Here's a power strip for your room so you can charge your phone, your tablet, your Glass headset, your Android Wear device, your laptop, and God help your parents with their power bill.
I think every backpack, camera bag, every electronic device bag I have has at least one USB power block in it.
Yes, and they're definitely a necessity, especially when you have something like Glass. That's a power drain. So moving on to our next story, Google patents new Glass design, trading Prism ARM for projectors. So this was kind of leaked by Fandroid as a patent that Google had applied for. Maybe possibly a new design for Glass. I don't know if it'll ever become manufactured, but
can I jump in on this for a sec? Okay,
absolutely.
The last two topics that we've talked about, just as someone who works in the media, as the journalist, I find it fascinating the way companies these days, high-tech companies, deal with public relations, because we go from being, the very characteristic Apple way, let's call it that, of doing things, where everything they do is so clandestine and so airtight. Nobody knows what they're doing until the late Steve Jobs made his wonderful presentations, and then now you've got these quote unquote accidental leaks about what's coming out, and oops, the pricing got out, or here's a screenshot of what the new Gmail is going to look like, or now you've got things like that. So I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. It's just amazing how these companies in the social age actually handle the dissemination of information.
Well, I agree with you in general, although I think this was an actual patent filing, so this is you can probably get it from the USPTO. Yeah, there's like on Google Patents. I have a link.
Well, even patents. You can say you can file a bunch of patents, and they can go out on all these ridiculous tangents, and legitimately so. But you can just do that to kind of distract an insatiable public from what you're actually working on.
Right. So it's more of a marketing gimmick now, as opposed to actual information.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's some merit to it, and there's credence you can give to it, but at the same time, it's like you do that, and that that every single tech industry blog is going to pick it up and run with it, even if they don't fully understand what they're writing about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and it gets them eyeballs, so more power to them. I'm just saying it's interesting how people go about getting attention for what they're working on. So
as I recall, last year there was a patent application that was much more closely aligned to the Glass we have now, but where the entire Glass section was like magnetically attached to a frame, and you would just like snap it on and pull it off, which was a neat idea. But this is quite a bit different. In addition to having just in addition to having both eyes being covered instead of just one, they seem to be more like projected. Like instead of the prism being in front of your eye, it looks like a much smaller prism that is being like magnified into your vision. So I'm not sure if that could be used for some sort of augmented reality factor, or if it's just a smaller screen or whatever. But it's definitely a different design aesthetic.
Yeah, so moving on to the next story. Ease came out with a glass app called Nod to Pay. Nod to Pay, Pay with Glass. So the app allows a user to pay with Bitcoin. It uses QR codes and nod gesturing to confirm payment. I think I can get in a lot of trouble with this.
They've got all the tech gimmicks covered, I gotta say.
Libby, I gotta tell you, I was worried that I was going to be one of the only explorers that thought this was a really bad idea.
Yeah. I feel like there needs to be at least a passcode attached to it for me. I feel like it's one of those things that if somebody got a hold of my glass, that would be it.
They can clear out your Bitcoin wallet.
They can clear out the whole zero.
And you know, if it's trying to mine Bitcoin at the same time, it's going to get awfully hot.
That's true.
I think my biggest concern on this is that, you know, it starts. One of the things that I always feel about glass, and that I always try to describe to people, is it just becomes natural. You kind of forget that it's there, and you do things kind of instinctually. I'm not sure I want to be handing out money instinctively. I just, you know, oh yeah, you can have here's money for you and money for you. That just seems like a bad idea, just from a user experience point of view. Never mind the whole security aspect, which also gives me nightmares.
Right. I think the idea is there. I like the idea of being able to pay through glass. It needs to be more complicated though than just a nod. It needs to be. It needs to be some hand gestures or something.
Here's my thing. If it needs to be more complicated, if you need to make it a deliberate action, you've got a perfectly good phone for that sort of thing.
That's true. Yeah, NFC works really well.
Right, and you know, one of the things I'd like to point out a lot is glass. Yes, it's a standalone device. Yes, it works great on its own, but it kind of goes on the assumption that you've got other technology that you have with you. It just wants to minimize your use of those to the appropriate times. To me, this just doesn't seem like an appropriate time for glass.
So I agree that the nod is a big gimmick. But what if it was something different, something like a Starbucks app that you would just like slide over, and one of the options was pay for your coffee or something like that?
For me, the reason I don't get really excited at all about these things is because usually payments is a very complicated ecosystem, so you can't just go and do a little part here. I mean, even Square right now, which is a big thing, it's still very tiny compared with the traditional things that are accepted out there. So I don't think this is going to have any traction, really.
How about for like a banking application, since we're talking about e-commerce, where you could do what you typically do with like with a smartphone application right now for your bank, and you actually use glass to take a picture of a check, which would then be deposited into your account.
I like it. There's certain things like that.
I mean, that's you know, you're still dealing with the transfer of funds theoretically over and you know, to Libby's point, it's like, okay, well, what if somebody got a hold of your glass and started snapping pictures of, you know, of any check out there, or if I actually drew a picture of a check on a piece of paper and then just said, okay, I'm depositing $10 million into my account.
They're already dealing with that. All the phone applications are already dealing with all those things.
Right.
And sure, there are loopholes, but are we like what Alan said? Are we actually creating more headache than problems that we're solving?
Right. I mean, my question for almost every glass app that's out there, including the ones that I work on, is there a reason for me to have this as a glass app instead of as a mobile app? And if the answer is maybe not, that's a sign to me that no, maybe we should rethink this.
Yeah, it's too early. It's too early for those apps too. I think in the future, when we're doing most everything on glass, then our tendency to want things in glass is going to increase. Because once, a few years from now, when you're doing everything between your watch and your glass, and you don't even have a cell phone with you, I mean, those things are going to start to make more sense.
Right.
And I think, like Cecilia said, it's not really working properly today, but I definitely see glass as a potential way to do payments in the future. I mean, if you imagine you're going to a store, maybe you got your hands full with whatever you just bought, or coffee, or something like that, and you just want to be able to quickly pay, it could work I mean, there's a lot of security issues and stuff, but there is with any financial application.
Yeah, although I know Cecilia, you alluded to this, I think, in an earlier show. I kind of like the idea of paying with your watch. I could see that more than glass, because you could do the NFC and then just type in a code.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, or some sign, some shape thing. Who knows?
Right.
Again, we go back to the patent thing, because remember there was a patent for this, which said, take a picture or something like that.
Is there really a patent for that?
I think our friend Justin's going to owe them a lot of money.
Yeah, there is.
That came out last year. They said there was a patent where if you make, if you do the Taylor Swift, like heart hand gesture, or you could do the Jay-Z, the diamond cut or whatever like that, you could trigger some sort of action in the Glass OS, which is a neat concept. But I mean, we haven't heard anything from it, and that came out last summer.
My opinion is that's a cool concept and a bad idea, which means we'll probably see it in a couple of years anyway. But
it'll be the hipster thing to do.
And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm in, I mean, I love glass as much as the next person, maybe even a little bit more so. But I am not going to a concert when I'm with 30,000 other people and making a heart-shaped hand gesture just because I want to take a picture of the lead singer of Slipknot. I will get severely beaten down if I'm in that crowd. That's just me, though.
That's just the crowd that Jason runs in.
Yeah. We're classy like that out here.
That's right. So moving on to the next story. So Samsung is developing an Oculus-like heads-up display. So I'll be honest, I tried on a lot of heads-up displays at the Augmented World, and none of them seem super comfortable. I'll be honest. Like, the weight is kind of a factor, and I'm looking at their device, and I'm thinking that's going to be the case here too.
Well,
is there not a counterweight in the back of your head?
There's a big strap.
Is the Oculus? Yeah, the elastic strap, right?
Yeah, there's a big strap.
I have two thoughts on this. The first is Samsung, rushing something to market because everyone else is doing it. Big shock. I'm honestly tired of listening to everything that Samsung does, because they just, take technology and keep throwing it at a wall and hoping something sticks. But in general, it doesn't surprise me. One of the things, and I know I keep harping on glass, and I keep coming back to it, but part of the reason is there is really an amazing amount of elegance in the design. When you talk to them about some of the careful planning they went into it, they went into it realizing just how much we're affected by weight on our face. Mm-hmm. And they did tests to see how much weight they could put on people's noses, how much they could hang off the backs of their head. And they discovered that, contrary to the way glasses have been designed for hundreds of years, we're better at holding weight behind us on our ears than we are in our noses. And that's why glass is designed with a battery behind with as little as possible up front. Because they realize that every ounce that they put on it is going to cause more and more problems.
Right.
So they were very careful with the design. They spent several iterations of designing glass to tweaking and tuning that weight ratio. And nobody else is doing that.
And that's only one axis, because when you think about it, so that's the back to front, say like the x-axis. The other one is how is the lopsidedness of all the gear being located on one side of it? How are we all not walking around with the things like this all the time? It actually doesn't go crooked.
Yeah, I'll say this. I don't think this is something that's meant to be walked around with.
I was going to say that too, yeah, because these are, we can't compare
on the couch. Yeah,
we can't compare at all. These are completely different things designed for different experiences. Glass was designed for being worn a whole day on, and Oculus and these other virtual reality things, the most important thing is the immersiveness and the latency. So they're working on different aspects, because you're going to be sitting. You can't walk with that. There's funny videos of people trying to do that. So.
Did you see the one where the guy was riding a fake roller coaster? This is awesome. Someone else pushed him from behind. The guy freaked out. It was really funny.
Yeah, that was
very immersive.
Although I will say, that being said, the heads-up displays that I did try during the Augmented World, even just sitting in a chair for maybe 5 minutes, you do get neck strain. Some of them are very heavy, and this is something that when you're not balanced, your body is going to is going to compensate, and over time that will give you some sort of strain somewhere.
But look how much progress has been made just within the space of the hardware for virtual reality. Like for those of you who remember the movie The Lawnmower Man with Pierce Brosnan, the contraption that he had to get into, the whole rig. I mean, and that took up like an entire room, and then you consolidate that a few years later, which was that movie with Demi Moore and Michael Douglas, Disclosure. Which, no? Okay, well, I was just saying. Okay,
I'm nodding no, because instead of just 80s music, I should have also mentioned your passion for 80s
movies.
Well, remember that movie when Demi Moore and Michael Douglas had that, their VR headset was merely like a headset and a glove, which was like the Nintendo Power Glove.
No, so, Jason, I really tried to forget that movie.
So you would assume, like to Cecilia's point, you would assume that with everything being mobile these days and portability being the order of the day, that we are going to continue to consolidate and make these devices wireless and make them light and like things like that, so that you can use them in a variety of environments.
But if you're serious, this is the first time that there's serious money in the VR area, triggered by Oculus, that was bought by Facebook, and then Sony, maybe Samsung. Sony is definitely serious about it, and they have the skills. They've been doing that 3D forever. So I think this is the first time that we're going to see real advancement. The rest that has been happening has been very amateur. But of course we'll see progress, but what I'm trying to stress is that their problems that they're really facing are other problems first. First, they have to address like the whole 3D, the whole immersive, the whole it's different set of problems. So
people
that's not their first priority.
Yeah, people are getting sick off of virtual reality. There's a very fine line. If you don't do it right, you'll have a migraine for a while.
People have said that with the there's like an unreleased version of Oculus Rift that apparently got rid of that latency that was in the video, and apparently that fixed most of people's sickness with it. So that's
well. Remember, people were also having epileptic seizures with what was it, the Japanese cartoon where you had the quick strobe effect. And there's actually, and I know this because I used to work at Blockbuster, is like ask people before they rent this video, do you have some sort of epileptic-like condition, because you can't rent this video because it's been known to have negative effects on people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now that being said, with this particular Samsung device, though, I do kind of appreciate how low cost it could potentially be made, because I think what it is that there's a headset display, and then you could put a cell phone in there.
Oh no!
I think that's a very crappy way.
Someone just put that graphic together.
That's the very crappy way of doing VR, putting a cell phone there.
That being said, there are a lot.
Shocking.
There are a lot of hardware components that Samsung makes, like the curved OLED screens and things like that. They could come in.
Think about that though. That's an interesting concept. If you would actually have a VR headset, like a dumb headset, that would essentially be a docking station into which you would put, like Alan said, probably one of their phones, and you'd mount it there, and that's where you get all your processing power. Then we
saw multiple of those. Jason, at AWI, they were showing multiple of those types.
Yeah, there were several of them.
Yeah, it's not the right way to do it. You need specific hardware. This is a complex problem, and the people that are like Oculus and Sony that are tackling with total control of the hardware, they're going to have much better results.
Yeah, and pivoting to the next story, there was actually more to this. They came out this week between Oculus and Samsung. Apparently, there's some rumors of a partnership where Oculus will be getting some of Samsung's OLED screen technology, and Samsung will be using some of Oculus's OS.
Sounds awesome.
So yeah, it sounds like the best of both for both companies.
I'm not saying that's the greatest way to do things, but you would sidestep the problem that Glass has now. Is everybody says the Glass hardware makes it the equivalent of a Galaxy Nexus. So that way you could swap in and out any phone you wanted, and you'd pretty much dictate your own level of computing power and memory and.
Yeah, it sounds good in concept. It sounds good theoretically.
Exactly. It's probably not going to happen, but.
I was also impressed with the creativity of the solution. I agree.
And is that not the precept that the Project Tango phone goes off of and everything? It's everything's modular.
The Ara, yeah.
Oh, the Ara, yeah. Sorry.
Although I'll say this, I mean, I'm gonna actually, Keith, can you pull up the article real quick and share your screen?
Sure. Which one?
The Samsung is working with Oculus on media-focused VR headsets.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is what you were looking at, but I don't think that's a real graphic. I think that's just
You know
someone
what
from
it
the article put
reminds
this
me
together.
of is
I think this
so
is what you're referring to.
yeah. Yeah, you know what it reminds me of is that, when you were a kid, the little toy viewfinder that you would
Yeah.
put different slides into, like this
Viewmaster.
is just
Yes, it's a
yeah,
Viewmaster viewer.
a Viewmaster. It's
Boy,
a
now 80s
Viewmaster with a
toys too.
cell
Yay.
phone, and you can immerse yourself into it.
Hey, look at this guy.
Was that not the greatest thing? Because it was an immersive experience, and no one's really talked about glass as a VR tool. But essentially, when you think of like applications like the mini games pack and everything, immersive experiences, essentially you're doing VR on
In a way.
glass.
In a way.
Maybe not.
It's a very low-tech VR. Alan
Right now is
cringing.
he's calling up our publisher asking that my name be taken off our book.
That comes up for a lot of reasons. I don't want to go there right now.
Alan right now is calling our publisher asking that my name be taken off our book.
Jason and I had a lot of debates while writing the book along this line, and they were always interesting debates. Let's leave it at that.
I lost 90% of it, obviously.
So moving on to the next story. So Fitbit gets an If This Then That channel, which I have already used, and it's awesome. Yeah, I'm thinking about setting up another recipe. If I get 30,000 steps in 3 days, I get I get a nice little treat.
I think Jason's setting one up so if he's more than like 5,000 steps ahead, he can taunt you automatically.
I think I need to set something up like
that
that too. If I'm ahead of
mentioned how far
Jason,
ahead
then I send an automatic message to him.
I wasn't sure I mentioned that already. Have I mentioned that I'm way ahead of you as far as our step count?
Oh, that'll go away in the next couple days. Don't worry.
There is some major league smack talk being conducted, like in the private, messaging system on Fitbit. Trust me, everybody watching this. No, it's a really cool service, and they also released Push Bullet as another service, which in recent weeks, which is equally cool. But yeah, the Fitbit thing, it isn't a full-on translation of Fitbit's API, but it does a lot of really cool things, and you combine that with the ability to push to glass, and it has these neat canned messages, which you can of course edit, but it's like. It'll be like, whoa, you just passed, your 5-mile mark for the day, hand pound.
Yeah, if this and that, the recipes are just, there's so many things you can do. You can integrate it with Google Drive if you want to track your sleep time. You could send a tweet to I think Libby and I were talking about this. You could actually do it if you meet your goal. You can celebrate by sending a tweet, or you could shame yourself if you don't quite meet it or something like that.
Yes.
There's a lot of interesting options.
You can send yourself permission to have ice cream if you meet your goal. That's I hate to say it, but that's what I do. So our next story actually I think was really interesting. So it's so make your existing watch smarter. So it's a device that works on any mechanical watch, I believe, and then what it does is you can make it so that it overlays a smartwatch functionality or notification functionality.
I think you might be grabbing a different story. This is actually one, or maybe I grabbed the wrong story. No, make your existing watch smarter. This one's about an actual a buckle device you can add to your watch, and it provides some sort of Bluetooth functionality. But this is I thought this was a screen of some sort. Tell you what, I don't know what this story's about, so let's go on to the next one.
Okay, never mind. We'll find that for next week.
Sure.
It was a really cool idea, though. So, but anyways, we'll talk about it.
That's probably going to be really awesome for the 7 people in the world who still use analog watches.
Yeah, I agree.
If you jump down 2, I think that's the one you were talking about.
Oh, maybe. Yeah.
Kairos?
Okay, so that was the one I was excited about because I think that was really cool. So our next story. Self-focused wearables, and the Rip Curl Search GPS watch just changed your surf sessions for forever.
Unfortunately, I don't have any surfers on. Well, Jason, do you surf?
I do not. I've tried it a few times, just living where I do, and I don't.
Well, if any of our viewers are surfers and would love to be able to relive their surfing adventures, I think this would be that sort of a thing. It's GPS enabled. Here we go. So this is what it looks like. Rip Curl, I guess, is a company that makes lots of surf-related sports gear, and I think the description was it'll remind you of the GPS location that you took, the date, time, number of surfs, and things like that. So just one more wearable.
And if you get lost at sea, hopefully they can track you by GPS.
No, that would be a killer feature.
That'd be interesting. I think that'd be expensive, though. Okay, yeah, so the next story is the one I was thinking of, the Kairos, mechanical smartwatch hybrid. So that's actually just a smartwatch with or it's a mechanical watch with a smartwatch overlay, which just looks so pretty.
Not to me, obviously.
Oh, that's right. You like square faces.
No, I just don't like analog watches. I hate them and anything that resembles the past.
It definitely looks like it's designed to appeal to people who are the holdouts for those mechanical watches. It's got the gears. It looks really cool, and it gives you the overlay.
You know what it kind of reminds me of is I feel like it'll do well in the steampunk movement. It's got a little bit of that in there.
A little bit. I think it's got too modern a look for that.
It's a clever little marketing gimmick that's the same way as people who go out and they spend $2,400 on a DSLR digital camera just for the fact that it's got a sound effect in there that when you press the shutter, it sounds like an old school camera.
Yeah, I agree.
I know people that have actually spent big money just for that feature on digital cameras. There may be one in the room right now who's just
Might or might not.
I'm not that much of a fan. I mean, I love DSLRs, but not because of the sound the mirror makes.
And there are lots of watches that clearly go for very high prices, and those are all mechanical watches. I mean, it's into the tens of thousands of dollars. So there is some market for people that like these sorts of things, but I don't know.
So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next story. So Samsung Gear is moving on from Android to Tizen, which I don't know if it's the best idea for them. I can appreciate what they're trying to do, but I don't know many Tizen developers. Although their Tizen conference is coming up next week, so maybe they'll pick up a few more from there. But
I think it makes sense from the sense of consolidation. I mean, that's what all their new wearable devices are on. Like Cecilia's got the Gear 2, which is running on Tizen, and runs fairly well. Although I do disagree with the underlying premise of moving away from Android to Tizen. I think that's more business-minded than really for users' best interest.
I will say this: after trying on the Gear 2, I really do. I like it a lot from the hardware point of view. It's light and it seems to do everything I want it to do. I just can't use it because I don't have
it there,
Samsung phone.
Sorry?
Do you have it there by chance?
Yeah, but I think I was loading it. Today it died for the first time. But here it is. It's super comfortable. It kind of has the basic purpose of being a watch and having pedometer and a few more things. I use it for sleeping every night, although I have to remind it, not like the basics that Kit has. I have to remind it that I'm going to sleep. It's very basic. The notifications are going to be so blown away from whatever Wear is going to do that's going to be sad. But the screen is good. The look is good. The feel is very good. It's very hypoallergenic because I had problems with the Jawbone app, and it gave me allergy, like contact allergy, and this one is working pretty well. So it has a lot of pluses.
Yeah, I mean, one thing about the Basis that I found annoying was it's really heavy for me. But the Gear 2 is very light. It's very light. You do actually forget that it's on your wrist.
I think.
Did you get the same kind of, like you said, you got a contact allergy? Was that kind of like the same one that the Fitbit Force had, where you got like that strip of metal and it just disagreed with
metal. For me, the metal, anything metal that is not a very precious metal. So like the titanium doesn't hurt me at all. The gold doesn't. But anything below that, it will pretty much, upset my skin.
I think in the Fitbit they were targeting the nickel, which is one of the ingredients in the steel they were using.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
That's a really good angle. You could tell somebody, well, if you want to buy me jewelry, it's got to be 24 karat gold or
That's right.
Or else I'm allergic to it.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move on to the interviews. So again, we've got two great guests. on today, Alan and Jason. And to be honest, I don't think we discussed who was going to do the interview. Keith?
Oh, yeah, this is normally Noble's room of expertise, but I think we can all just sort of pose
We
our
can
own
all
questions.
ask them questions. Like, what is your spirit animal?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
No, let's don't do that.
Yeah, we'll leave that for
Only
Noble.
Noble can do that.
Honey badger.
Well, for us, the spirit
I think-
animal is sitting on the front cover of the book.
Of course.
So,
Yes, yes. And what would that be?
what was it again, Jason? I've already forgotten what that.
They were
what the birds are.
red-billed magpies. They are red-billed magpies. Which, okay, so here, funny backstory about that. So when Alan and I were first, we conceptualized what we wanted to write about, and then we agreed we were going to do it together, and then we pitched, and then we got O'Reilly to back us on this, and they said, yeah, we want you to work on the project. We also said, Alan and I spent like 5 minutes, and we said, okay, well, there is a published list of animals that they already use, and O'Reilly's signature.
They're known for what they call the animal books.
Yeah.
Based on the fact that all of their front covers have an animal on them.
And they never use the same animal twice. So it's sort of as an author, it's a thing of distinction when you get like an animal. So we were talking about it, and this is before the GDK was live. And so we're like, and we're like, how about we started looking up, and we did a couple Wikipedia searches, and he and I were in a private hangout, and I was like, how about we do a vampire bat? Because a vampire bat is one of the few animals in nature that can see its own reflection in the mirror. Hint, hint. And we're like, okay, that was cool. And then so we asked O'Reilly if we could have that, and then when the book was ready to go, our publisher actually sent us the cover, and they go, okay, well, your animal's been pre-selected. The vampire bat wasn't available, which we came to find out was by a guy who wrote the book on what did you write, Alan?
HTML5 audio? I think that was it. It was HTML5
yeah, the
audio.
HTML5 audio API. And the funny thing was he actually wanted a dolphin, but the dolphin wasn't available, so they gave him the vampire bat.
Oh,
and we wanted the vampire bat.
What was his name? Do you remember?
He's a Googler. He works at Google.
Oh, okay.
And it's a really good book. I checked it out. And it was funny because, of course, we co-wrote the book, and now you've got these two birds who we had to go look in Wikipedia, and they said they're among the tallest birds, proportionally speaking, in the animal kingdom. And Alan and I are both 6'3", 6'4". And the fact that there's two of them on the cover, everybody starts saying, okay, well, which one are you?
So your book got released, I think it was last month in April.
Yes.
In ebook form, right?
Yes. In
Is
ebook
it not? Is it available in print, or is that still to come?
It's still to come. It's in what they call an early release version, which means that as we have the bulk of the book there and written, but it's not done yet. So we're still making revisions. We're still soliciting input and feedback from people who are getting it and reading it, and we're still writing it essentially. But once we are finished with the book, it will again be released in ebook format, so people who buy it now will get the final version, and at the same time, there will be a print version, and that's currently targeted to be December. That's not a firm date, but that's roughly when everyone is planning on it to be released at this point.
And one thing we do want to emphasize.
Glass will be out by December, is that right?
I was thinking the same.
We'll be starting to
Yeah, maybe not. Well, the one thing we want to emphasize is, because it's a early release, and and you can submit, like feedback, and several people have sent us stuff already, and they've said, oh, that's a pretty cool angle, but I think this has changed, or I've heard this is rumored to go away, some aspect of of the Mirror API or the GDK. We welcome all comments, and we're reviewing everything, and we're trying to qualify everything. And if you do submit a comment that winds up being valid, either to be an addition or to be a change for something we wrote, we will gladly put you in the book and give you your proper credit, because Alan and I both believe, and we had this mentality from day one, is that's not only good literary practice, that's also good open source. And if you submit something, a patch, so to speak, we will gladly put you in the book. And this book is as much a product of the Glass community as it is between he and I, putting our minds together, because we've had so much input for people like yourselves on Wearables Weekly, and for people in all the Glass communities, and people that from moment one when we said we were working on this have been nothing but supportive and encouraging, and said, if you need anything, just let us know. And I mean, it's been such a positive experience, and so we want to be able to give back and just say, if you take the time to read this while it's still being developed, if you have something you want in there, and we can qualify it and everything like that, we will certainly make you a part of this book, because essentially everybody has been.
One of the things we did a lot of is, as new glassware was coming out, we were talking to the authors and getting a sense of their experience and reviewing the glassware and looking at, okay, how is this glassware a good design? What are the lessons that we all learned in developing it, in designing it, in trying to get it out there, in using it? What are those lessons that will help other people create great glassware? Because that's really our fundamental goal, is we want this platform to succeed, and the best way it's going to succeed is if we've got a lot of us doing really awesome stuff.
And there's an interesting video of Alan right now, because he was speaking at a Glass NYC event, and he was doing like one of those intro to development courses, and so he actually split time with Zach Friedman, who's a hardware hacker. And so Alan talked about Mirror API, and Zach talked about the GDK. And I remember as I was streaming that, and Alan was chatting with me as soon as he got off stage, and he was blown away, because he goes, okay, show of hands in the crowd, who out here has actually knows the 5 principles of good glassware design as dictated by Google? And he got a so-so response, and he goes, okay, how many people have actually gone through the design recommendations and have applied them in their own glassware? And what was it, Alan? Less than 10%. It's astonishing how people have not taken these recommendations into their projects, and they just want to go in and just start hacking away and use the APIs and throw something together. So, and I think that's been a deliberate revision of Google's marketing approach, and they said, okay, well, we really have to tell people how to write stuff that is not only functional but usable, and that is pleasant, and that stresses empathy with the user through the device.
So you guys are writing this book since last fall, through a large amount of dynamic action was going on in the Glass community, as far as the SDK, I don't think, was out initially, and the community itself has evolved over time. So what was that like, writing a book on a product that was changing all the time?
Actually, it's incredibly disturbing. In some ways, it was great, and in some ways, it was an incredible problem. To give you really an idea of the scope of that, our copy of the manuscript was due to the publisher on April 15th. So we send it in, we tell them it's all there, it's all in your system, all set for you to review. And on April 16th, XE16 came out, which made half of one chapter completely incorrect. Several very large paragraphs that we dedicated to video streaming went completely out the window. So, overnight, what we thought was a finished manuscript suddenly had to get major editing behind it.
I mean, think about that, you guys. We basically took every reference to video calls and the Hangouts app, and we basically had to strike everything that we wrote, and that actually played a pretty good part about how to interact with glassware and how proper glassware should be written. And when they cut that, I'm like, okay, that all goes up. I mean, personally, I don't know about Alan, but when I was sitting at home and I found out how much got cut from XE16, I think I strung together more curse words in a row than the movie Goodfellas and Snoop Doggy Dogg's first CD combined.
I can imagine. And so how many more words will come out if they add that feature back by chance?
well, here's the other thing, though. On the other point of it, the fact that we were learning a lot as we went along, and the community was learning a lot as we all journeyed this together, really made for some of the examples in the book, and really made for there are chapters and design principles that we put in the book that if all we had done was read Google's documentation, they wouldn't be there. Really, a lot of there's a lot of the book that is there only because of the lessons that we personally learned and that we as a community learned in using this, in what works and why does it work. So some of that took some time to mature and really understand.
As an example of what works and what doesn't work, because the crux of our book and everything that we did, and he and I took a lot of time in putting this together, and we basically encapsulate everything in the book under a single philosophy which we call Think for Glass. And that basically means that you design your glassware and you make it functional and you make it pleasant to use. And again, you design it in a way which caters to micro interactions. So you're not imposing on the user, these 5-minute sessions just to do the most menial of tasks. And when we put that together, things like if you've used Twitter's glassware a lot, Twitter's got this really neat feature where if you're using their menu items and you favorite a particular tweet, or if you retweet it, the next time you go back to that menu item is colored, as opposed to just being, like all grayscale or just white on black. It's little subtle changes like that that you might not think about, but they lend in a very mighty way to your usability and to actually making the platform, incorporating it into your life. Because one of the things that we take some time in the design, and again, the book is actually separated into 3 different. Essentially, it's a 3-act play. There's discovering all about the ecosystem, and glass isn't just a device. It's a series of software platforms. It's everything that happens in the cloud. It's everything that happens on the hardware. That whole thing. And then there's the design chapters.
Almost.
Yes, and then there's the development chapter. And what we talked about in the design section was how this is an interesting way to approach software development, because no longer do you have the precept of, okay, you've got a user who's going to sit down physically tethered to their computer for hours at a time, and you've got to do all these different menus and then context menus and everything. It's like, no, the user's real world experience is essentially their backdrop. And so what you have to take into consideration when they use your glassware, what are they doing in the real world? Are they standing in line at the bank? Are they watching their kids while they play in the pool at at some community rec center or something like that? Are they just lying in bed at 2 in the morning and everything? And so everything that's happening in the real world essentially becomes the background for your app. And that's an interesting design challenge that we've really not had before.
Are there any particular apps that struck you guys as being like just? You mentioned one as far as the text changing. Did you guys have any favorite apps that really embody these principles? That I don't know. I guess Alan.
One of the things we really like to do in it is we pulled out a number of apps, and I don't think there was any one that embodied every single design principle, but we pulled out plenty that offered good, solid examples, and I think we really tried to make the point with a number of them about, hey, look at this feature, for example, in the mail application. Look at how it gives you those subtle cues to let you know, yes, there's more that you can read, or yes, here's who it's from and here's how many people it's from. Those are things that by now, as glass users, we've kind of come to expect, and in some ways, we may have forgotten about. But if you're designing it for the first time, it may not be obvious to you that you need to give those subtle cues. The first time that I tried some stuff with Voodoo, the pages that it was generating were functional and they worked well, but when I had others look at it, they're like, how am I supposed to know that I want to read more, that there's more to read? And I'm like, oh, you're right, that's something that's missing.
Alan,
and we then go the step and say, here's how you do that.
That's perfect. Hey, Alan, now that you mentioned Voodoo, I'd love to hear a short scenario to use Voodoo, and also to hear about your review process.
That was let me tie that into the book quickly, because that's actually one of the things that I think helped us with the book a great deal, is that in going through the review process for Voodoo, you really get a better understanding of what the glass team is looking for, and what problems they've seen in other glassware and what they want to steer you away from. So we tried to take some of those experiences and put them into the book as well. And I was fairly early in the review process. It sounds like a lot more. They formalized the process a little bit more since I went through it. But that experience was a really good one. One of the things that I guess I want to pass along to a lot of people who are going through the review process is it's a process. It's really there to help make sure you are creating the best possible glassware that you can create. So if you've gone in and you've hit all of the design principles and you really think you understand everything, you've gone through their checklist, they're going to still challenge you and say, is this the best way to do it? Could you do it this other way? Is that better? And if you can explain why this is why I think this is good, they'll say, okay, maybe you're right. That's a valid way to approach it. To give you an example with Voodoo, at one point they suggested that I bundle cards together. which is very solidly a glass design principle. So if a number of documents come in, maybe I should have a Voodoo bundle instead of showing each one as a separate card. And I said, that's a good idea, and that makes a lot of sense. But for me, bundles are representing something a little bit different. They are representing zip files. So while I'm not supporting zip files yet, I want to support them, and that's what I want to reserve bundles for. And they said, that makes a great deal of sense. Let's not push the bundle concept right now. So it's that kind of discussion where everyone is trying to figure out what is the best way to make the glassware look right and comfortable and easy for the users to feel like it's just an intuitive thing for them. Everyone's still working on it, so there's a lot of discussion on that front. As for use cases for Voodoo, it's tough, and it's not tough because I don't have them. It's tough because there are so many different ones that I talk to people. Everyone's using Voodoo in different ways. Mm-hmm. My two favorite examples right now is I have a gentleman who does who's using glass to record movies for his company. He uses them to create workspace training films. And with glass previously, the way he integrated it as part of his workflow was he'd shoot the movie on glass, he'd plug it into his Mac, he would either plug it into his Mac and download it and load it into the system, the editing software that he was using, or he would upload it to YouTube. He would share it to YouTube, use an extraction program to get it off YouTube, and then load it into his workflow. Now with Voodoo, he shoots it, shares it to Voodoo. Voodoo puts it on Drive. Drive automatically downloads it onto his machine, which automatically loads it into his workflow. So he's cut out about 5 steps, which were manual, a lot of manual work. It's now automatic. And to me, that just kind of really gives it as an example what I was trying to do with Voodoo, and that's take processes that we were doing today, look at what we're doing, how we're doing our work, and automating large chunks of it, and doing it in a way that only glass can do. And that's kind of the beauty for Voodoo for me. The other great use case that I love talking about is I've got a gentleman who is using it to do building inspections. So previously he would go around with a digital camera and a tape recorder, and he'd get back to his office and he'd transfer the files off the camera and load them into his document, and he'd then listen to his tape recorder, take the transcripts, and build his notes from what he was listening. Now what he does is he shoots pictures and sends them to Drive through Voodoo, and he dictates notes and sends them to Drive through Voodoo. He gets back to his office. He now has a collection of files sitting in Drive. He drags and drops them into place. He's almost prepared his complete report before he gets back to his desk. So it's those kinds of things that really show to me two things. One, the power of Voodoo, but two, and most importantly, the power of glass to change and improve how we do what we're already doing. That's why I'm so excited about glass as a whole.
Now, if I can just add something to that, because that directly goes into the composition of how we put the book together. And Alan and I talked about this right from the start, and we said we don't want to write what's referred to in the industry as like a rip and read book, where we've got like a 600-page book and 400 pages of those are code that you can just go online and download some zip file and then tweak a little bit, and then boom, you've got a glassware application. There are books already in existence, like our friend Eric Redmond has wrote a book called Programming Google Glass, and he wrote his first book for the Mirror API, and he's finishing a book on the GDK right now, specific towards coding and things like that. We wrote the book to be very abstract and very generic, so even if you're an entrepreneur or a project manager and you're someone who wants to take like an existing brand and extend your effective reach over to glassware, and you're not necessarily going to be sitting down for 8 hours a day, banging out code or working on designs, as you move from screen to screen, you can still have an idea of the type of experience that you want to deliver to the wearers of glass who will use your application, and say like, okay, now I know how to get from A to B to C. And to
extend
to really have an idea and build a business around that.
The other aspect is we really did want to also appeal to programmers, to developers.
Yeah.
But kind of we went into it saying, if you're a developer, you already know what you're doing with your field of interest. You're already an expert in your programming language. You're already an expert in writing great software. We're not going to tell you how to do your job. What we're going to do is help you understand how to apply everything you already know. All of your years of experience, how do you apply that to Glass? So if you're already a web developer, how do you take your knowledge and transfer that to the Glass world? If you're already an Android developer, how do you take your immense experience and use it on Glass? So there are large chunks of the book where we have very little code or mostly guidance. Instead of telling you, this is what you do, we tell you, this is why you do it. This is how you think about what you're doing. This is how you transfer your knowledge into this new domain, and this is how you read Google's documentation.
And I think by that merit, the market for Glass books, us as being one of the first, but going forward, is going to be really, really huge because, the Mirror API, because it is language agnostic, and you don't have to say, okay, well, you've got to be a PHP programmer, or you've got to do Java server pages, or you can only use Microsoft.NET. They can basically take any web framework that you use and just apply that to the Mirror API because we didn't want to, write for a specific language. Our book is a little bit more amenable to a broader reader base, but there are going to be a lot of different books there to say, like, okay, well, if you're the PHP crowd, there's book 1, 2, 3 for that. If you're more a Java guy, there's a bunch of books for that. And so we also didn't want to, kind of like alienate ourselves in that. It's like let's put this philosophy that we've come up with into building great glassware, not just good glassware, but great glassware, and actually make that as available to a wide audience as possible so that they have that mindset and they don't just say, okay, well, I want to read this book, and by the time, I take 2 days to read Alan and Jason's work, I'll have like a bunch of code that I can just, like I said, take, paste into some editor and everything and just tweak a few lines of code and, I've got my own app. We want to actually give you the right mindset to approach your project and do it the right way so that you can have a truly great application that'll be listed in My Glass, that'll be one of the ordained applications, and you'll have a ton of users. And to be able to actually to do it right and to be happy, and hopefully from an engineering standpoint to do it as efficiently as possible and not spend months and months and go over versions and versions and versions of this and do it the right way the first time.
Great. That's a lot of awesome back and forth between you guys, so thanks a lot.
You can tell
this is our relationship over the last 2 years.
Yeah, you can tell the hours of dialogue and conversation.
Well, it's funny because we're vibing off each other pretty positively, and we're doing the whole Heckle and Jekyll thing right now. Alan, let's talk real briefly about some of the things we haven't agreed on. We've had a couple.
It sounds like
shouting matches.
We want to know what's next because you guys work so well together. Now the book is almost out. What are you going to do next?
Android Wear. Are you guys going to write a book on Android Wear?
That's actually a really good question. As this was happening, we saw Wear coming out. We saw all of that in. We saw all of the information coming out, and as we started reading the design documentation for Wear, we're like, wow, this looks very familiar.
So it is addictive in reality to write a book, huh?
Yeah. So, so we very much entertain the notion of, well, do we address Wear in this book? Do we write another book? Because a lot of the design principles that we talk about in this book don't just apply to Glass. We think they'll apply really well to Wear, and it sure sounds like Google thinks it'll apply really well to Wear too, because the documentation looks very similar. So I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned, and we're seeing a lot of Android developers right now making the same mistakes that we made a year ago as Glass developers. And if we can get a book out sooner rather than later to help them get past those mistakes, I think it's going to benefit everybody.
Okay, so let's tell some funny horror stories now. I know one is, and this is probably the best one, of when we could not just agree on stuff putting this book together. The book went from being an initial, we outlined 12 chapters, and that expanded to 14, and then 18, which got whittled back down to 15. The title of the book has been changed 4 times. The order of the chapters has been jumbled, so much. It's like some video game, like word mix-up. But the one thing that we were diametrically opposed to was the Glass web browser. And I'll tell my side of it, and then I'll pipe down and let my colleague, tell his side. I basically said, when I took the liberty and I said, okay, I'm going to start laying out material for the chapter on web access. And he goes, yeah, because we need that. And I was like, okay, the web browser on Atlas, here I go, I start to type. And I was like, it's really, really great. It renders pages. It's not the fastest browser around, and it's certainly not Chrome, but it does a really good job, and you can read content. And if you're doing something that doesn't have a huge imposing UI like Wikipedia or like IMDb, and the UIs are very, very light, it's a really good tool. And if someone sends you a text message with a link in it, or an email, or a Hangout group chat message with a URL in it, you can bring those up and you can actually get good information. If there's a twit pic that's included in something like that, you can actually see the tweet. And I said, and that's a really cool thing to do. Alan, not so much.
And I saw this chapter, and he was starting to talk about, here's where you can finally apply all of your JavaScript, and here's where you can apply your CSS, and you can create these wonderful HTML5-based pages. And I'm like, no, this completely violates everything we've just spent 13 chapters talking about. You can't say this. This is all wrong. So we had several good days of furious debates, which eventually ended up with both of us presenting our opinion in the chapter itself. So this is probably about the only chapter where you see two completely opposite perspectives show up. We each make our case, and hopefully our readers will agree with me that that's the absolute right way to go.
And now what I want to do is I want to flip the script, and I want to ask Keith and Libby specifically, because there's a part in that web access chapter where we talk about, we actually cite a case as a pretty interesting way to use the browser. And when the two of you, specifically Libby, when you guys were moderating the at Breaking Glass last year in San Francisco, the winning entry was Glass Frogger, of course, which is a gesture-based take on the classic Frogger game. And we interviewed the developers behind that, and they said, we didn't want to write something that was based on Java or C++, and would have to do those code compile, debug, redistribute cycles. So we wanted to build a web-based game and just say, we'll just hit save, and then every time we do, the game will be updated the way it needs to. And so we're basically going to have a static card which launches the browser, and then we can measure, we can track the sensors on Glass through JavaScript, but it's going to run in the browser, and you can play like that. And personally, I thought that was an interesting way to do architecture, where you could actually write a HTML5 game without going through the complexities of writing a native game. So what do you guys think, Libby and Keith, about that, when you actually saw it in real life and you were talking to the development team behind it? Because I think it's a great idea. It's an interesting way to solve a problem.
When we had the Breaking Glass hackathon, to give you guys a little bit of background, I think that capability had just shown up on Glass in the update like 2 weeks prior to the hackathon. So, Keith, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think the GDK wasn't out at that point, so there was some native development you could do, but it was definitely hacky.
And so that was one way they were able to access the sensors without having to do it as a side-loaded app.
But it was very impressive. Like, you could not tell, if they wouldn't tell you that it was an HTML5 app, you would not be able to tell, and that was impressive.
Yeah, you would never know. I thought it was genius. I thought it was a really creative way to write a Glass app that wasn't a Glass app. Because in all honesty, it really wasn't a Glass app. It was more of a web app.
Yeah,
well, the interesting thing I thought about that is, you juxtapose the fact that the Glass Frogger team put that app together as a proper web application in, 38 hours? Mm-hmm. And then when the GDK announcement came on, when Timothy Jordan announced that in San Francisco, I believe the team that did Spellista was there, and they actually said, they're like, okay, well, you want to know the truth, and we put this GDK together, this game together, and we're a game development studio, so we've done this kind of thing for years and years and years. We had a lot of people work on this. It took us 3 months to put this game together. So not saying that's bad. It's just when you work natively, that's the engineering cycle that you're dealing with.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that's what the genius behind it was. It was so simple. It was such a simple solution
Now,
to.
Alan.
and now here's my
Yeah.
angle. I agree that it is a clever hack. It was a clever approach, and it's cool in certain ways. But let me ask you this: how many of you are still playing Frogger? I see
Well,
no hands. How many of you are still playing Spellista? I see no hands. This is my problem: is that really, really good glassware is filled with micro interactions, and Frogger and Spellista and others are not focused around those micro interactions. So while both of these are great examples of conceptual ideas, while both of them have a lot of lessons to be learned about developing great glassware, one of the lessons I think needs to be that these sorts of games are uncomfortable to play for
right.
long periods of time.
And Alan, to your point, I'll be honest. The one thing about Frogger and Solista, they are great apps to demo for. So it's great when people who haven't seen Glass, who haven't tried on Glass, it's a great app to just put it on there. It's easy to grasp. But no, in all honesty, when you're using Glass, for every day, no, it's not something that's practical.
Which is
I agree.
exactly what Cecilia said about WordLens.
Exactly. I mean, it's a great.
But I'll make a point about immersive experiences on Glass. I do believe there's some room for immersive, and obviously, an immersive experience on Glass is not a micro interaction experience. So those are just a different type of interaction on Glass, and I believe there's room for that. And when we created LinksFit, for instance, it obviously can't be about micro interactions because you're going to be doing a workout for an extended period of time. Although we have something in the middle where the screen can go away, the voice is still there, the sensors are still counting. So, but I think we have to be open to immersive experiences as long as they're short.
Absolutely, and I think I guess really what the lesson is, it's not that immersive applications shouldn't be on Glass. It's that when we're going to break that rule of micro interactions, we need to be very conscious and deliberate about doing so. In the book, multiple times we cite LinksFit as what's really a great example of an immersive application. Navigation is another great example of an immersive-like application.
And that's the example we followed. Actually, you nailed it because that was our example to follow.
I think the lesson in both of those cases is that the user is still doing micro interactions with the application. You're not staring at LinksFit. You're not staring at navigation. You may take glances at them periodically, and you're kind of assuming that they're always going to be there so you can glance at them, but you're not staring at it and trying to drive. You're not staring at it and trying to do your workout. You just know that it's there, ready and waiting for you the moment you need to use it. And that's the big difference. And Jason, if we haven't put that in the book, let's make sure we do so.
Well, each of you that's in this room right now is cited at least once, probably like multiple times. We actually reached out to Libby and we asked her if we could use a quote that she gave in a presentation where she actually said, one of the big benefits of Glass as designed is Glass is naturally a social product, and so when you build glassware, that's an area where you can very easily exploit in very positive ways.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's very true.
So check is forthcoming for that, Libby.
Good. I claim 5%.
Yeah, your royalties are part of the contract.
So, well, on that note, I think we're gonna sign off for tonight. It was a really interesting discussion, but I know it's super late for you right now, Alan. So. Oh, Keith, your microphone went off.
Yeah, so I see. Seems to be not wanting to stand up straight anymore. Anyway, I was just going to say, in Noble's honor, we do have to ask at least one question. Now, you guys both are wearing sky tonight, so can you tell us real quick how you came up with that color for yourselves? Starting from my left, so Alan.
It's funny you ask that, because usually the question I get about sky is, which came first, the color glass or the color of your shirt? Because I'm increasingly known as the guy who matches his shirt to his glass. And the answer is both. But why sky? I thought it would look better on me than any of the other colors that were out there. I have blue eyes. I thought it would work well with blue. I'd seen a lot of talk about glass as a fashion accessory, and since I know absolutely nothing about fashion, I took their word for it. So I simultaneously was upgrading some of my wardrobe and upgrading my accessories, and blue was the right color for both of them.
10 points for honesty.
And Jason?
My answer, tragically, isn't as elaborate. It was the only one that was available when I went to the base camp.
You wanted the tangerine, right?
No, I'm totally kidding. And what most people watching this don't know is that when I went out to San Francisco, because I had to fly out there from Guam, and I went to San Francisco, and Keith and Libby actually met me the night before I went to the San Francisco base camp, and we had a very lovely dinner, and we had this really long conversation about life and about technology and about everything that we've gone through. And
we solved the world's problems within that hour.
Yeah,
it also helped that we stopped by a Tesla dealership, which I think was a highlight of it.
Oh, that was awesome! God. And I've got a picture of the three of us, and of course I think in San Jose that night it was maybe like a balmy 76 degrees, and here's Keith and Libby like standing there smiling, and I'm the idiot who's there like freezing my island butt off. But for me, I always wanted blue because blue's blue's a favorite color of mine. This isn't exactly the shade of blue I would prefer. I would like something like a nice, dark, sexy cobalt. That's my personal opinion.
I think David
to match your shirt. For you.
Yeah, I know G-Pop makes like covers and everything that I should check out. But also for me, I wanted something because I knew I was going to be the only person in the short term in my community to actually have glass. So I wanted something that would draw attention to myself, not to be showy and not to be arrogant about it, but just so people would actually ask me. And again, because I'm a news anchor, people are going to see it with me on TV, and they'd see it very naturally, and they say, "Hey, is that thing?" And I mean, so many people that I run into that want to know about glass. I think 7 out of every 10 people that try it on just want to take selfies. They don't necessarily ask me what it's all about and everything. They say, "Hey, that's a thing I see on YouTube and everything. Can I try it on? And can I snap a picture with you, or can you take a picture of me with it?" But yeah, I just wanted to be like have something that would actually clearly let people know that I actually had it, and I'm more than welcome to talk to them about it and let them try it.
I would never peg you as an extrovert, Jason, but I'm glad you clarified all that.
Oh yeah, like I'm totally introverted. Yeah. Well, that's the other thing is in writing this book, real quickly, like Alan was, he burned so much midnight oil because he was developing his own glassware, he was giving presentations, he was doing hackathons and working with the developer community and working on this book. Me, I kind of like locked myself in a room for many, many months and was trying to formulate these ideas and send them to him and say, "Hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this?" And kind of galvanize the philosophy that we now have into a really coherent stream. And then he'd come back and he'd say, "Oh man, the pulse of the community is this, this, and this, so we have to work this in." And so it's been a lot of work for both of us, but certainly a labor of love. And we hope that the glass community would see it as something that we've done to give back. And personally, I knew I was all the way out here on the other side of the world, so I can't go to these hackathons and be part of the meetups and be part of the community that I've come to enjoy so much. So this was my way of contributing to the movement.
Great.
Very cool. Well, again, thank you guys for coming on tonight. It was definitely a fun show. It's always fun when you guys come on. You guys always have a lot to talk about.
Thanks for having us, because it is really always great to chat with these ideas with you.
Yeah, especially you guys being writers, so I'm sure there's a lot of interesting thoughts and a lot of interesting theories that always come up whenever we have you on.
Oh, and real quick, we want to plug the fact that we are actually doing a Hangout on Air series now every month, and the first one is going to be next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Is it 8?
8 p.m. What time? Whose
Wait,
time?
when is it? You mainlanders in your time zones and everything.
It's Wednesday.
Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, maybe?
Look for the events.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically what we're going to do is we will be focusing on specific industries and niche interests, and the very first episode is featuring Noble and his work with LinksFit, and we're going to concentrate on glass in games. And I know we've talked about that here a little bit, but we're really going to go deep, so please tune in.
Very cool. What's it called? Is it just going to be hang out with Jason and Alan, or?
I think right now it's just called Glass for Games. We're probably gonna. I was thinking about that, Alan. We'll probably just call it Think for Glass by default.
Yeah, it will be.
That's
We'll be
perfect.
using our Think for Glass slogan.
That's
So
your
should we just follow you on Google Plus? Just check for the event page posted by you guys.
Yep. So Alan Firstenberg and Jason Salas. Definitely watch that.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.